I have a confession to make. I have always been the best at following my own advice. When it comes to dealing with strange occurrences in the woods, while investigating the Mothman sightings in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, I spent a lot of time alone. But I did my best to follow Rule No. 1. Never go into the woods alone. Rule No. 2. Don't stay in the woods after dark. And Rule No. 3. Don't investigate strange sounds or voices. Those are the 3 most important rules every survivalist must live by to stay safe in the wild. I know that better than anyone, yet when I was young, I broke all of these rules, and this is the story of what happened to me because of it. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is episode number 46 of our series Creepypasta Stories. Now before we get into this one, I need to say that I probably wouldn't have believed it myself if it was for the fact that my dad made me promise to never tell anyone what happened. That means I've carried the guilt and fear of this story around with me for over 20 years now, not knowing if and when it would come back to haunt me. Well, I guess now it's your problem too. My dad was one of those people who just loved being outdoors. Took my brother and me camping every chance he got, which was great because that's how I learned to survive in the wilderness. But as we got older, we stopped going as much. Dad got a job that required him to travel a lot during the week, and my brother and I both had other things going on. Every summer, we would take a long camping trip together. The year I turned 18, we decided to rent a cabin in northern Alabama, somewhere close enough to drive to in a day, but far enough away to feel like an adventure. The cabin was nestled among some tall pines in a clearing about 100 yards from the shore of a lake. It was isolated enough to be peaceful and quiet, which is what we were all looking for. We unloaded the car and spent the first afternoon swimming, fishing, and just relaxing. My dad caught a big old catfish, and we had that for dinner along with some burgers and hot dogs. After that, we sat around the fire pit and told stories, roasted marshmallows, and looked up at the stars. It was perfect. The next morning, we went out into town and got some supplies, then headed back to the cabin to spend another day swimming, fishing, hiking, and exploring. It was my brother's idea that we should hike into the woods behind the cabin and check it out. I didn't really want to, but he said, "Come on, scared of the dark," and I knew he was right. So I followed him and Dad down a game trail that was barely visible through the thick underbrush. We walked about 100 yards until we came across a small clearing where the trail seemed to end.
Ow.
There was a huge oak tree in the center of the clearing with thick vines growing up its trunk. It almost looked like a giant spider web. "What do you think?" asked my brother. "Looks like a place where a witch might live." I laughed and started to walk back towards the trail, but Dad said, "Hey, let's go check out that creek over there." And before I knew it, we were walking further into the woods than I ever imagined we'd go. We crossed the creek and continued deeper into the woods. The forest grew darker and thicker the further we went. The trees closed in overhead, blocking out most of the sunlight. We could hear the sound of running water nearby, but we couldn't see any creeks or rivers. It was getting late, so we finally turned around and started to head back. But as soon as we stepped off the trail, we knew we were lost. I tried to keep calm, but I could sense the fear in my dad's heavy breathing and my brother. Shaky voice as we called out for help. As darkness fell, the forest came alive with spooky sounds. We heard owls, crickets, tree frogs, but mostly the sound of running water. We found a small stream and followed it downstream, hoping it would lead us to a road or a ranger or someone who could help us. But all it led us to was a dead end. And when we turned around, we realized we had no idea where we were. Then we heard it again, a loud rushing sound like a waterfall. We followed the sound and found ourselves standing at the edge of a deep gorge. The river had carved a deep trench into the earth, and we were at the bottom of it. The only way out was up. We started to climb, but the steeper the path got, the more unstable it became. The rocks were loose and shifted under our weight. We helped each other up the last few hundred feet and collapsed on the ground on top of a huge boulder. It was pitch black by this point, and the wind was whipping through the trees, making them creak and groan. Then we heard it again, a loud rushing sound, but it seemed to be coming from inside the gorge. We stood there frozen in fear as the sound grew louder and louder. Suddenly, the ground beneath our feet began to shake violently. My brother screamed and grabbed onto my shoulder. Whatever was down there was moving closer. I could feel the vibrations in my bones, and my whole body started to shake. The noise reached a deafening roar, and then everything went silent. My brother and I looked at each other in disbelief. Then we started to run as fast as we could away from the noise and the shaking. We ran blindly, crashing through the underbrush, stumbling over tree roots and rocks. Finally, we came to a clearing and collapsed on the ground, catching our breath. It was still dark, but the trees were far enough apart that we could see the faint outlines of the woods around us. We could still hear the sound of running water nearby, so we knew we were still near the creek. But whatever was down there had gone silent. We stood up and started to walk slowly, carefully, calling out for help every few minutes. We walked what felt like hours without finding anything familiar. When the sky finally began to lighten with the first hints of sunrise, we found the trail and followed it back to the cabin. We didn't stop until we were safe inside with the door locked and the windows barricaded with heavy furniture. We didn't go outside the cabin for the rest of that day. We didn't even go swimming in the lake. We just stayed inside with the curtains drawn, hugging each other for comfort as we waited for whoever or whatever was out there to leave. But when we finally dared to look outside, the forest was silent and still. The only sign that anything unusual had happened was a slight mist hanging over the trees. It looked as though a light rain had fallen during the night, but there was nothing on the ground where we'd been sitting. No leaves, no twigs, nothing. We packed up our things and left immediately after breakfast. My dad drove in silence most of the way home. And when he finally broke the silence, his voice was tight with emotion. "Do you think that whatever was out there last night is still out there?" he asked. We all knew he wasn't talking about a bear or a mountain lion. We'd seen plenty of those in the wild before, and this was something else, something evil and terrifying. That's when my dad told me to never tell anyone what happened in those woods. He said he'd handle it, whatever it was, whatever had chased us out of the woods. I believed him then, and I still believe him now. But sometimes when I hear a strange sound in the forest or I see the shadows of trees swaying in the wind, I can't help but wonder if what my dad did was stop whatever was out there or just delay the inevitable. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Creepypasta Stories. If you did, please remember to leave a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button. I also want to give a special shout out to our Patreon supporters. Your support helps us produce these videos and allows us to continue sharing these stories, so thank you. Also, if you have a story you'd like to submit to our channel, please use the link in the description below. Until next time, stay safe in the woods.